Melinda, thank you so much for the introduction, the invitation. It's good to be here and to see all of you, so many familiar faces and some new people as well. First, let me say how much I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject, post-secondary education and talent development in Louisiana. I'll share a little bit about some observations from the field. I've had an opportunity to visit all of our public institutions in my 8 months on the job. And I'll also talk a little bit about where I think we're headed in terms of master planning and visioning work for public post-secondary education. First, let me say on a personal note how wonderful it is to be back in Louisiana, a state that I love, doing work that I love, and a special treat for me to be back home in my daughter's senior year of high school. So I'm very excited about that. I think there is no secret to the fact that we have significant work to do to lift educational attainment in Louisiana, a state that has much poverty and much opportunity. We see urgency in this work because the economy is changing. And the reality is everyone needs a credential beyond high school. And so when you see a premium on skills and competencies, the fact of the matter is we need to make sure that more and more people have that opportunity in our state. Today, about 45% of our population has a credential value beyond high school. That is too low. And so our work is to change the narrative and to ensure that there is more opportunity for more of our individuals. You all know that we have too many people living in poverty, too many children living in poverty, and so it is our job to do work to change that. So that brings me to point number one. Question number one, I'm sure for many of you, is college important for everyone in Louisiana? The answer is a credential value beyond high school that is market relevant is important for everyone. And here's why. As I mentioned, this knowledge economy requires more than a high school diploma. So we have to send a clear message that the high school diploma is now the floor, not the ceiling. And we have to do more and more to ensure that more people have a credential, an associate degree, a four-year degree, an industry-based certification so that they can be successful. We also have to send a clear message that there's honor in all pathways. At one time, the pendulum was that if you only had a four-year degree, that was a measure of success in America, certainly in Louisiana and other places. So now we have to say that where you start is not where you finish, but a student's aptitude and interest should determine their path, and we need more paths and more opportunities for more students. So honor in all pathways is very important. I will say that as I analyze the state of the state in terms of human capital, on the good news, we see that our state is educating, or our institutions are educating more individuals. So more people are completing college, more minority students, more Pell students. So we're trending positive in those areas. We also are doing a better job in getting college to high school students. Dual enrollment has exploded from about 2,800 students in 2003 to about 30,000 students in 2017, and we see more opportunity there as well. So that's the good news. We're trending positive in a number of areas. But here is a significant challenge. In a state of over 4 million people, we find that over 1.5 million people have a high school diploma or less. Now, there was a time in Louisiana when a high school diploma was still provided you with an opportunity to make a living wage and to support a family. But that is now not the reality in our state. And so we know that we have much more to do to ensure that more people are moving out of poverty and into prosperity. The other thing that I would mention in terms of this idea of the changing economy, sort of a proof point in terms of is college worth it, is that the Georgetown Center has done a study on jobs created since the recession. 11.6 million jobs created. How many went to people with a credential beyond high school? 11.5 million. So the fact of the matter is, certainly a college degree is worth it if you finish what you start, if it's market relevant, and it allows you to reach additional opportunities in terms of employment and education as well. Today in America, your family's income, your race, and place tells us a lot about your likelihood of academic success. Our big job in Louisiana is to change that and to decouple poverty from opportunity. It is an enormous challenge, but one that we have to take on in our state. so that regardless of your parents' background, your family's educational background, your family income, you have that opportunity to indeed reach that credential, that life-changing credential. How will we do that? That requires new thinking, deeper partnerships, new engagement. We have to evolve our system. We have to think about change at scale. We have to make sure that we move people from poverty to prosperity, to make sure that more people have education and employment in Louisiana. So that means K-12 partnerships with higher education, business partnerships with communities, faith-based organizations engaged, lots of people, state and local engagement as well, regional partnerships to make sure that we get this work done. Now, our Board of Regents has adopted a new attainment goal for our state. Our goal is that 60% of our population have a credential of value by 2030. So that means in 11 short years, we want to have a goal of ensuring that we are doubling our credentials and getting more people to have that opportunity so that we're increasing talent development in our state. That means we have to think more broadly about talent and think more broadly about talent development. So when I think about talent in Louisiana, I think about traditional and non-traditional students. I think about single parents, returning adults, veterans, opportunity youth, individuals who are justice involved. All of those individuals represent talent to be developed. And when we think about talent development in Louisiana, we think about the opportunity for individuals to receive credentials, industry-based certifications, as I mentioned, associate degrees, four-year degrees as well. So we have to make sure that we're thinking about multiple pathways, that we're creating multiple pathways, and that we're putting people onto these pathways so that they can be successful. But it takes more than that. It takes making sure that students have access to good information, actionable information. Because as a researcher mentioned last week, Sandy Baum, it's important that we do more than say every kid needs to go to college. We have to make sure that every student has information about the right college, the right major, and has the right support in order to be successful. So for us in Louisiana, to get to this goal that our board has set, we need a both-and strategy. We need to think about our traditional students and our adults as well. When we think about our populations and our opportunities to partner with K-12, consider this. In post-secondary education, we graduate 40,000 students a year. In K-12, across Louisiana, they graduate 40,000 students a year. And so we see opportunity there. What is the opportunity for us to ensure that more students have an opportunity to graduate high school with a credential? If we're able to do that, we can ensure that more people have educational attainment and less of our population is a population that has a high school diploma or less. So we see an opportunity for us to think about universal access to dual enrollment and really evolving a system so that we're blurring lines between K-12, higher education, and workforce. So we know that our high school students are college and career ready because they are getting that college and career experience in high school. We think that is very important for us. When we think about the other end of the spectrum, our adults, we think about the fact that these are individuals who really have a challenge with time and money, right? They're trying to squeeze as much education into complex and very busy lives. So one of the things that we have to ensure is that our community college system, a strong entry point for our adults, is affordable. And so I am concerned as I look at our data that Louisiana's families, when it comes to community colleges, our community college system exceeds the national and the SRAB average in terms of what families need to pay to go to a community college. So as we celebrate 20 years of a community college system, I think it is very important that we think about affordability and certainly think about affordability for our four-year institutions as well. The bottom line is this. If you can't afford it, you can't achieve it. And so we have to make sure that we're not working cross purposes in terms of our policy work. We have to make sure that people have access to credentials and quality credentials at that. Finally, let me say a bit about my campus visits. In 8 months, I have had the opportunity to visit all of our public institutions. I will visit our private institutions next. And I wanted to make sure that I got to every campus as quickly as possible, because I don't believe that you can do good work from Baton Rouge without walking the rural and urban campuses of our state and understanding firsthand about the challenges and opportunities that exist on our campuses. And so as I visited each campus, I, of course, toured facilities, some in good shape, some in terrible shape that really need support. I visited with administrators and faculty, and of course, my favorite, I got a chance to engage with students. And here's what I observed from our students. Regardless of their background, they are so committed to getting that credential. They believe that earning that credential will provide new opportunities in their lives. And so I met students who are working multiple jobs, some working one job. I met students who are parents and caregivers and foster youth. I met students who were food insecure and worried about being able to have a good meal to support them. And obviously food insecurity is real on our campuses, and it is a completion challenge. So we have to think about how to support those students as well. I have sat with returning veterans and asked them about their transition and what more they need. And as you may know, last week, the governor and the head of Veterans Services announced that we will have 30 veteran centers on our college campuses to support our veterans and their families. So that is important support as well. And I also saw so much resilience. Campuses that have weathered storms and floods, campus leaders that have had to rebuild and support institutions, campus leaders who have faced the largest disinvestment in higher education in the nation and still are committed to this work. As you know, Louisiana is a resilient state. Our people are resilient, and I love that about our state. But this challenge is an important one for all of us to step up to the plate and support. How do we ensure that education for all is not just a great saying, but a great reality in Louisiana? It will take all of us engaging deeply in this work so that we can develop talent in our state, so that we can decouple poverty and opportunity, so that we can ensure that more people are on the prosperity pipeline, that they're educated, that they're supported, that they're able to do, as Monty Sullivan always says, be taxpayers. He talks about the fact that the community college system, the goal of the community college system is to create taxpayers, to make sure that more people have the opportunity to contribute. And so I do think that this is important work for our state. I am certainly honored to have the opportunity to engage in this work, to work with an amazing staff and a great board that is committed. But the master plan, the visioning work that we will do is not public post-secondaries alone. We are stand in partnership with all of the partners that I mentioned, K-12 and business and community leaders, to get this work done. Because it's not public post-secondary's vision for higher education in our state. It is a state vision. And it is important that we recognize that for our state, for Louisiana to be as prosperous as we want it to be, means that we have to ensure that more and more people have opportunity in Louisiana. Thank you. Questions?
Kim, what was your take on the first report on the minimum standards and how the students were faring who had been admitted by, I think by exception, if that's the right terminology?
Yes. The question is, what was my take on the first report that the Board of Regents received on students who were admitted by minimum admission standards? I think a couple of things stood out. First of all, the most important one, obviously, is that you can mitigate deficiencies with support. When we looked at the report, we saw that the students that were prospering, many of the students that were prospering were athletes. And why? Because they have helicopter parents called coaches that make sure they're going to class, that make sure they're going to tutoring, that make sure they have support. So it's important that when we admit students, we ensure that we do everything we can to support their success. Louisiana has had almost a 20-year journey of having differentiated admissions criteria for our institutions. The goal is to make sure students are in a place where they can be most successful, and we know that means having strong student support and strong academic support for those individuals. Yes?
What does the phrase of value credential of value mean? I mean, there was a time, not too many years ago, when a law degree didn't have much value.
Great question. So the question was, what does of value mean? I'm looking at my friend here who's reminding me. He's in charge of reminding me to repeat the question. So when we think about of value, we think about market relevance, right? So there are many credentials that an individual can pursue. The question is, does the credential improve your ability to improve your life, to support your family? And is it a credential that allows you to continue to learn and to earn at the same time? So that is the of value conversation that we're having in this state. We look at what's happening in terms of academic degree offerings. I know that in the K-12 system, they're looking at their Jump Start program, Jump Start 2.0, really analyzing what's happening in terms of, are the credentials earned of value in the marketplace, and do they help individuals to advance professionally and personally as well? Yes.
To me, two of the most important things I hadn't heard you mention, one is entrepreneurship, and second, the most pressing thing few people realize is the food supply chain. So I haven't heard you mention either one of those. If our food supply chain, which is in agriculture and things like that, is not kept at the forefront, that supply chain, especially with all these international global trade deals and everything, is going to be a huge problem in 5 years. So, entrepreneurship and agriculture, maybe. Could you make some comments on that?
Sure. First of all, on entrepreneurship and food supply, right? So first on entrepreneurship, let me say that I do think it's important that when we think about knowledge and skill building for our Louisiana residents, that we think about not just preparing individuals to fill great jobs, but to create great jobs. And how we do that, I think, is very important on our campuses. So the idea of entrepreneurship, the idea of cross-discipline work for students, getting those experiences is certainly very important. We want to make sure that we are leaning into that, so thank you for reminding me of that. The research and development that happens on our institutions, very important. Our research institutions, the ability for them to create knowledge is very important as well, and to support that. So certainly we support that work, we see value in that work, and we want to make sure we're leaning into that. I will also say a little bit broader in terms of innovation. I do think that we have to think about innovation not just in terms of job creation and knowledge creation, but how do we innovate what we do in terms of educating individuals? We see the results of what we've done so far, right? We're trending positive, but not at scale. So how do we think differently about this work? What does that look like? Could it be 3-year degrees? Could it be competency-based education, prior learning assessment? There are lots of innovations in terms of knowledge transfer, both delivery and how we think about educating individuals, that we need to think about and support. Certainly in terms of agriculture, we are a strong agriculture state, and certainly that is important for us as well, that our ag centers and our food supply is supported, that they are doing more in terms of innovation and thinking about how do we grow crops that will support a growing population, how do we ensure that we're warding against any dangers in terms of food safety and pesticides and all of those kinds of things. So these are the things that happen on our campuses each and every day, and these are the kinds of things that people think deeply about each and every day, which is very important to our state and to our people. And so yes, those are two important areas for sure that we have to continue to support. Yes?
Let me ask you a follow-up question. The Farm Bureau has an outstanding program called Ag in the Classroom.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
A little bit.
Do you see a way that can be carried over into higher education?
So I do think that, let me answer it a little bit broadly. I do think that exposure in K-12 is very important for our students. You know, when we think about what are the growing industries and the growing needs, if people are talking about STEM, if they're talking about if they're talking about healthcare, I certainly couldn't visit one community in Louisiana without hearing about the nursing shortage. the idea of making sure that students have information about these things is very important. So to your question about ag in the classroom, yes, that's important, but STEM in the classroom is important, and health science and allied health in the classroom is very important as well. We need to make sure that more and more students have exposure to the kinds of careers and opportunities that will provide support for them, that we make sure that more students know what engineers do, that know what accountants do, that know what ag farmers and others do, what scientists do. And so I do think it's our responsibility to ensure that more of that exposure is happening for our students. You hear the saying a lot of times that students can't be what they have not seen. And so I do think it's on us to make sure that more and more kids have access to good information. They see role models that look like them. They learn more about all kinds of wonderful careers and opportunities that they could avail themselves of with education and support. You're welcome. Yeah.
In terms of the budget situation, I know that the board requested an increase in the budget. Have you gotten any indication from the administration if they are open to an increase in higher education financing, and if so, how much?
The question is, in terms of our budget, have we submitted a request for an increase? Yes, we have. And have we heard from the administration about their thoughts about that? The governor did come to our board meeting early on, I think it was my first or second board meeting, and talked about higher education being reinvestment ready. And he talked about how great it has been to at least stabilize higher education, and how much even greater it will be when we can reinvest in higher education in targeted ways. But I am mindful, as everyone in this room is, that we have budget challenges in Louisiana. Our budget request focused on affordability and innovation, because I think those are two areas that would move the needle in our state. I do think that there is an interest in trying to support higher education more deeply, but I don't have a sense of whether or not that will be a reality this year. And as you know, the governor has talked about teacher pay as his #1 area. We've shared information about faculty pay as well. And we would love to see an opportunity where there is no fee increase for higher education this year in Louisiana. What drives up fees? Unfunded mandate and faculty and staff pay. And so if we could come to a place where we could support those things, we could ensure that we are focusing more diligently on affordability for our students, and I think that's an important area for us to be in. So we'll see, Melinda, what happens there. I don't have any early indications that we will get additional funding at scale, but we certainly have a willing partner in terms of the division and the governor in talking through the kinds of things that we think would be important to move the state forward. Yes?
On the statistics on the front of the sheet that you handed out, one of the more interesting ones to me is the number of students nationwide that are living on campus, only 13%.
Right.
First of all, do you have an idea of what Louisiana is and how that's changed over the years, what we were doing 20 years ago, what percentage? And then does it hurt each campus drastically financially?
So the question is, on the handout, nationally, 13% of students are living on campus. And the question is, what's the percent in Louisiana, and what's the impact on our institutions? I don't have the number in front of me for Louisiana, but I will say that it is important that we share information like this on today's students, because if you say college students in Louisiana, in America, people will think 18-year-old, cardigan sweater, history major, 2 parents, suburban, dropping them off to college. And when you look at the populations of students that are enrolled in our colleges and universities, they are very different from that, very diverse. We see, as I mentioned, single parents and returning veterans and traditional and non-traditional students. In fact, in our community colleges, I think the average age is 27. And so we will continue, I think, Jack, to see people who are enrolled in our colleges who are traditional age students who have a residential experience. But we will also see, I think, a continued increase in individuals who will not have that residential experience, who are focused on trying to upskill or get that first credential as quickly as possible and moving on to all the other things that they have to do in life. You know, when I was at LSU as a college student, I would always say that I was trying to squeeze a little bit of life into my education, going to football, having fun. But the students that I meet today are trying to squeeze a little bit of education into their complex lives. And I think we have to recognize that when we think about how do we deliver education and what time we schedule classes and how we think about affordability. These are important policy conversations for us to consider. Yes?
Question, in your tour of the state, around the state and everything, are other higher education universities, colleges, are they having to deal with the same problems that LSU is with their fraternities, things like that? Is that a problem statewide in other universities, or is it just for LSU that's having such horrendous things happening with their fraternities?
Let me say, first of all, that we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support the safety of our students. The legislature, I believe last year, Matt, passed a statewide hazing policy that the Board of Regents implemented. It required us to work with every campus and every system to ensure that policies were in place. I had an opportunity at Southeastern University to do a roundtable conversation with students about the policy. Because this is the important thing we need to make sure that we are aware of. We need good policies, we need good laws in place, but students have to make sure that they're speaking up and that we are protecting each other. And so I talked to the students a bit about what's the reality that has happened since a death on an LSU campus, and how do we as administrators better support them so they have good information, so they have the confidence to speak up, and that more students are safe. And so is it isolated to LSU? I would think not. Is it important that we talk about this on every single campus? Absolutely. And that's work that we're doing continuously, certainly trying to make sure that students feel supported, that parents know that we are on top of these issues, that we have zero tolerance for hazing, and that we make sure that we're sending an important message to the students that this culture has to stop, and that students have to know that they will be protected, and that administrators have to do their jobs as well.
On the, your community college comments, is it the tuition that's out of whack with the rest of the country? And if not, what do you want to do about what you're talking about with the community college costs?
So when you look at the affordability study, and SRAB puts out an affordability study each year, when you look, Will, at the amount of money that a family has to pay in order to enroll, community colleges in Louisiana are larger. The amount that a family has to pay is beyond the SRAB and national average. So for the 2015-2016 year, the 21% is the amount an average family would have to pay of their income. In the SRAB, that would be 17%, and nationally, that would be 18.2%. And so what do we do about these issues? How do we make sure that we're thinking about affordability? First of all, obviously, we need to make sure that we are in a position where we are not increasing the cost of education in our community colleges. But I know that the community college system also has a couple of pilots underway, a Go Grant pilot, to try to see if you can use your Go Grant, need-based aid, to support students who are in short-term, high-demand certificates. You know, how do we leverage the resources that are available to make sure that students have this opportunity? The other thing that we're looking at, because we are an under-resourced state, is how do you leverage every benefit that an individual receives towards a credential? So whether our families are on TANF or SNAP or child tax credit, or receiving WIOA benefits, how do we use every single one of those benefits to leverage towards a completion or credential of completion? Those are important conversations to have, and so we are early in the conversation, but it is an outlier that I think we have to call the question on, because as you know, the community college system was built with this vision of saying it's open admissions, and it will be affordable. So it will be an important point of entry for so many. And so when our point of entry is not affordable, it's a real challenge for us in a state where we need to increase credentials. Yes? No, you?
Vic,
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
What kind of damage have the hazing allegations done to the perception about the opportunity to education in Louisiana?
Well, when I have an opportunity to visit with parents at commencement or other times, I always say how much we appreciate them entrusting their most important asset to our institutions. That is, I think, an important thing to think about when we look at these allegations. And so the damage is that there's a concern about student safety. And anytime there's a concern about student safety, we have to do all that we can to address it, to ensure that there is learning from the situation and that hopefully it doesn't happen again. And so I think the legislature certainly responded in terms of laws that have been passed. The Board of Regents has responded in terms of the level of training and engagement that we're doing with campus leadership and with systems and with students as well. So will we move forward from this? Yes. But the important thing is, how do we ensure that it stops happening? And what does it take to ensure that we have a culture change that ensures that more students are safe and that you participate safely in these organizations? Here's the bottom line. I participated in a Greek organization. I'm sure many people in this room did as well. And there are many people who are doing it right, who are doing a good job. But we have to think about what happens when it goes wrong. And what is our responsibility to respond to that and to ensure that that doesn't happen again? That's the work that we're about doing right now.
Has the response been appropriate so far?
I certainly think that it has been a big response, right? You saw students who were arrested, you saw administrators who were put on leave, there is a robust investigation underway. And so as they walk through that information, it will be important for us to look at that to say, did we miss anything? Did we miss any early warnings? Was there more that we could do? And so we will certainly participate in that as well. Where are we in the replacement of Jim Richardson in the REC? Has that process started and where are we? So Dr. Richardson, as you all know, has served for 30 plus years as the economist on the REC. The legislation requires that the Board of Regents identify in-state faculty with forecasting experience to fill that position. And so we have requested from the systems their recommendations for faculty who meet those obligations. Our goal is to make sure that before the session begins on April 8th, that a list of recommendations are put forth as required, 3 to 5 names to the governor and leadership in the House and Senate. So we will meet that timeline, I believe, and get the job done. It will be interesting, obviously, to think about how do we replace Dr. Richardson, and we've talked a bit about, this is both a talent and temperament exercise for Louisiana to find someone who can do this work because it's very important to have that independent voice on the REC. Yes?
To go back to the question about relevant credentials or
Yes.
quality credentials, and so to me that implies you're looking at encouraging students to go into higher paying careers like engineering or other things. How do you reconcile that with we desperately need teachers, for example,
Yes.
but their compensation does not, measure up if you're comparing the two? How do you work to get the number of teachers we need, qualified teachers, as well as give other students an opportunity to for higher paying careers?
So first of all, I'm sorry. How do we think about market relevance in terms of the reality that a career like a teacher may not be well paid? And so how do you provide good information for students so that they can make good decisions, recognizing that a teacher may not make good money, but certainly is priceless to our community? Let me say that you're absolutely right. We need more great teachers in our classroom. I had an opportunity to meet with the deans of education last week to talk about what's happening in terms of teacher shortage and what more we can do. We want to make sure that students have good information to make good decisions, and that we don't track students. Whatever your aptitude and interest is, that is what you should be able to be. But the question is, how do we ensure that people are interested in these professions, right? So I met with a group of students, not here in Louisiana, but they were high school students in a teacher cadet program, high school students who want to be teachers. And I asked them, tell me why it is that you're in this program. Why do you want to be a teacher? And several of them said, My favorite teacher touched me on the shoulder and said, "You can do this. Teachers change lives. It is the profession that makes all others possible." And they were on fire about teaching because a teacher made them excited about it. But so teachers make a difference, right? And if teachers talk about the profession as a great profession, more students will go in. And when they say it's hard and difficult and the pay is terrible, then people may not want to participate in that. And so I do think good information is important. I do know that we need to make sure we have great artists and musicians and scientists and teachers, the full range of those professions. But we do a disservice to our students when we don't tell them all of the information, right? What happens when you are able to avail yourselves of these credentials? What is your potential earning potential? How much time and money will it take you to get those? And then students can make informed choices. And we have to also think about debt to earnings for our students. We need to make sure they have good information about that as well. And when we have transparency and information for students about time and money and opportunity, then I think it's good, right? Students can make good informed decisions. Right now, what we know is that there's not enough good information that is actionable to allow students to guide their path. And so that's, I think, an important work for us to do. Yes?
I'll ask you another question. The Baton Rouge School Board really opened up I don't know if you say a can of worms, but it could be a real boondoggle when they refused Exxon's request for tax exemption. So it seems to be the mood of some of these taxing bodies to jump on the industry and, soak them for more money and everything. What's your opinion of the industrial tax exemption program?
So I haven't studied the industrial tax exemption program, but I will say that, we need strong partners in this work, right? We need strong partners, community partners, business partners, K-12, higher education, trying to think about how do we educate more students and how do we support colleges and universities and K-12 as well. So I'm sure that those Barbara sitting at the table and probably knows much more about it than anyone in this room from her past experience. But I'm certain that those conversations will happen. Sometimes we have difficult conversations that allow us to get to good policy conversations. But at the end of the day, I will say this broadly. We need better schools in Louisiana. We need stronger support for our teachers. We need new partnerships between K-12, higher ed, and industry. And anything that we can do to support that, to accelerate that, to improve on that is important. It's an important dialogue for us to have in our state. Get them all?
Last chance. Any more?
One more.
In terms of the process for updating the master plan,
Yes.
what are the timelines for when the Regents Board will actually get a draft of the proposed changes and then enact them?
So our passport, the question is, and what is the timeline for the Board of Regents master plan? When will the board receive it and how will we proceed? Our past board chair asked us to have a new master plan prior to the legislative session. And so again, we are sort of back mapping from that. We are working diligently on a new visioning document, a new master plan now. Our goal is to make sure that our board has it, at least a draft in the next month. Certainly, we have an opportunity to talk with them about all of the ideas and the policies and what we see in terms of what needs to occur. Let me say this, the exercise of thinking about visioning work for Louisiana has been an enlightening one and an interesting one. The last transformational master plan was our 01 master plan in Louisiana. That was the plan where we created a new community college system, where we set in place differentiated admission standards, where we began to do this important work to move our education ecosystem forward. And so we've looked to see, what has happened since 01. Did the exercise work? What did 20 years of that work, or almost 20 years of that work, deliver? That allows us to really think about and talk about what's the next step. And so we want to make sure we have good information to share about how have we done and good information to share about where we need to go. And so when we think about this work, certainly we think about the fact that, this is an exercise to really decouple, as I mentioned, poverty and opportunity in our state. We know that correlation between family income and parents' educational level and a student's success is very, very strong. The question is, can we decouple it in Louisiana? Can we ensure that your family's background and your educational level of your parents does not determine your likelihood of success? And I think that is the grand exercise that we have to take on in Louisiana. And so this master plan will certainly think about how to innovate and how to educate and how to collaborate and how to move that agenda forward at scale in our state. And so I'm excited about the work that we're going to do, but I certainly want to make sure that we're very clear that this is a big job, a big challenge, but one that we are up to and certainly looking forward to taking on, because we need to do that for our Louisiana. We want to make sure we have the most vibrant state possible, and that means we have to make sure that more people have opportunity in Louisiana, that we erase equity gaps, that we move students forward. At the end of the day, our exercise is not just to make sure that the kids of the parents in this room go to college. Our kids are going. The question is, how do we make sure that the kids who are not thinking about it, who are not enrolling, have the opportunity to go as well? Thank you.